Gente, seguimos programando acá. Seguimos programando JavaScript, viendo las promesas.
xhr.response. And we can remove this other console.log. And save.
Y
So now let's use
estamos
load cart
acá
in our previous
una promesa que va a otra promesa y que devuelve la promesa y que después usa then y corre el código.
example. On the left, we'll scroll down and open checkout.js. And at the top, let's import load cart.
Ahí está, mira, la promesa. Lo primero que hace es correr log produce. Pero log produce es una función que está en otro lado. Entonces, primero corre resolve, después lo que está en log produce. Estas cositas que son así entre paréntesis son arrow functions. Después acá cuando termina toda la promesa, lo que está arriba de la línea 12 a la 8 hace el then, y el then corre render summary y render payment.
Here we'll import curly brackets load cart from a string, and we'll go to the
Esa
data
fue
folder,
la
which is
recapitulación.
data/,
Les
and we'll load
pido que me
cart.js.
apoyen con un like, por favor.
And now we're going to use this in our callback code to show the problem with callbacks. First, let's comment out this promise so we can focus on the callback code. At the top, we'll type /*, and here //, and we'll remove the comments for the callback. And after we load the products, we're also going to load the cart. So inside this function, we're going to type load cart brackets, and we're going to give it a function. So this function is going to run after the cart has loaded. So now let's say that we want to wait for the products and the cart to load before we render the page. To do that, we need to move this code inside this inner function. So we'll select this, and then right-click, cut. Inside load cart, we're going to right-click and paste, and remove this extra line. So now this code is going to load the products, wait for it to finish, and then it's going to load the cart, and then wait for the cart to finish, and then it will render the page or display the page. So let's save and check the console. And now you can see that we loaded the products, and then we loaded the cart. And if we open the page, everything was displayed properly. So now let's go back to our code, and notice that when we added another callback, we created another layer of nesting. So we have code inside code inside code. The problem with this is that each layer of nesting adds some indents at the front, or spaces at the front. This means if we have lots of callbacks, our code will become more and more nested, like this. This is a big problem with callbacks. Multiple callbacks cause a lot of nesting, and all these indents make our code hard to work with. Promises solve this problem by letting us flatten our code. For example, let's load the products and the carts again, but this time using our promise instead. First, let's comment out the callback using /*, and at the bottom, //, and we're going to uncomment the promise. So here, we'll remove the comments. And then in the next step, instead of rendering the page, we're going to load the cart, like we did down here. So we'll type load cart and brackets. Now we have a problem here. We want to wait for load cart to finish, and then go to the next step. However, we usually do this using resolve, but we don't have resolve inside this function. To solve this problem, inside .then, we can actually return a new promise. So at the top, we're going to return a new promise and brackets. So we're going to give this promise a function, just like we did up here. So we'll type brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And this function gets one parameter called resolve. So inside .then, if we want to use resolve to wait for some code to finish, we can return a new promise. So now let's move our code into this new promise so we can use resolve. So we'll select this code, and then right-click, cut, and inside here, we're going to right-click and paste, and remove these new lines. And we can give load cart a function to run when it's finished. So we'll type brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. Once load cart is finished, it runs this function, and then inside here, we're going to call resolve so that we move to the next step. So here, we'll call resolve and brackets. So now this will go to the next step. And we currently don't have a next step to this promise, so let's add the next step. At the end, to add another step, we're going to use .then, brackets. And we'll give this a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. So the third step is to render the page. So we're going to do the same thing inside here. So let's select this code, and we'll right-click, copy. Inside the third step, we're going to right-click and paste, and adjust the formatting if you need to. So that's how we do these three steps in the callback using a promise. We do the first step, wait for it to finish, call resolve, and then it goes to the second step. We do the second step, wait for it to finish, call resolve, and then we go to the third step. So a promise lets us have as many steps as we want, and we can use resolve to wait for each step to finish before going to the next step. So let's save this and check the console to make sure it worked. So we'll open the console, and inside here, we have the same messages as last time. First, we load the products, we wait for it to finish, and then go to the next step. Then we load the cart, wait for it to finish, and then go to the next step. And then we render or display the page. If we open the page, you'll see that everything displayed properly. So now let's go back and compare promises and callbacks. So even though promises require a bunch of setup code, you can see that it keeps our code relatively flat. The third step doesn't get more and more nested, like in callbacks. So if we have a lot of steps in our promise, this is what the code will look like. you can see that even when we add more steps, the code does not become more and more nested. So promises help keep our code flat and avoid too much nesting. So that's why it's recommended to use promises instead of callbacks. Promises will keep our code more flat. So let's actually add some new lines here, as well as here, to better separate these steps, so it's a little easier to read. Lastly, we're going to learn two more features of promises. The first feature is we can give resolve a value. So inside here, let's give it a value like the string value1. So whatever we give to resolve is going to be saved in a parameter inside .then. So inside this function, we can add a parameter called value, and now whatever we give to resolve is going to be saved inside here, and now we can use it. So this lets us share a value between two steps of a promise. So in here, let's check if this worked using console.log value and save. And if we look inside our console, you'll see that it displayed value1. So whatever we give to resolve will be saved in this parameter. The second feature is we can run multiple promises at the same time. Currently, we wait for things to load one at a time. For example, we wait for the products to load, and then we wait for the cart to load, and then we go to the next step. To make this more efficient, we can actually load the products and the cart at the same time. To do that, we can use a feature called promise.all. Promise.all lets us run multiple promises at the same time and wait for all of them to finish. So let's scroll to the top, and we'll do an example. So here, we'll type the code, capital P, promise.all, and brackets. Inside these brackets, we're going to give this an array. Inside this array, we can give it multiple promises to wait for. So let's just copy paste the two promises that we have here into this array. So we'll start from here at the end of the first promise, and we'll select this code, right click, copy, and in this array, we're going to right click and paste. And remove this line. So we have our first promise, and at the end, we're going to add a comma, and we're going to give it a second promise. So we'll scroll down to our second promise here, and we're going to select this code, starting from here, and select the promise, right click, copy, and at the top, we're going to right click and paste. So we basically created an array of promises, and then we're going to give this array to promise.all, and it's going to wait for all of the promises to finish before going to the next step. So now let's add a next step. At the end, to add a next step, we're going to use .then and brackets, and we'll add a new line to make it a little easier to read. So as usual, .then adds a next step to a promise. And we'll give it a function to run, so brackets, arrow, and curly brackets.
Ya me voy a
After
la
we load the
mierda,
products
gente.
and we load the cart, we're going